Hello, it's Aaron here at the Battle of Prestonpans Jacobite Museum in East Lothian, Scotland, bringing you the 15th video update from our What If interactive wargame campaign. Now, it turns out these videos are something like buses. You wait ages for one to come, and then all of a sudden you get two in quick succession. But since there's been a dramatic event taking place in our campaign, I thought it best to bring you news as it happens. Now, those of you who've been following will remember quite clearly that our French and Jacobite armies have finally linked up together just north now of Reading, and they're lingering in that area with one foot on either side of the Thames, whilst the British forces of King George II are still focused on London itself. Now, the two armies are very evenly balanced, and having just spoken to the British High Command, they've decided they are not moving out of the city just yet. They're waiting to see what happens elsewhere before making a move. So nothing has actually changed since the last update in this part of the country. The same cannot be said for the south of Scotland, where things have been moving pretty quickly, and that's where we're going to focus our attentions for this video. This is the situation shown on Andrew Johnson's 1720s map of Scotland. This is the situation we inherited at the end of the last video there. The red circle at Peebles is Colonel Durand and his mixed force of Scottish and English militias, and they are just back from a successful raid into Gladsmuir, where they'd taken on some Jacobite supplies. Now, in response to this, the Marquis of Tullibardine has gathered a scratch force of Jacobite Lowlanders and Highlanders drawn as detachments from those principal Jacobite garrisons, the blue triangles there. He's still not quite even matched in numbers with Durand, but nevertheless he's getting there. And I put to our social media followers, as always, with Jacobite strategic decisions. What should they do next in response to Durand's activities? And the decision taken was to take the army across to Glasgow. Glasgow was a natural focus for Jacobite ire by this stage. Tullibardine had fought there much earlier in the campaign, of course, as those of you who've been following since the beginning might remember. But the decision at this point was that the Jacobites would not march directly against Durand, nor would they stay on the defensive, but instead, by marching across to Glasgow and then from there sweeping down into the home regions of Durand's men, they would firstly keep Durand out of the most dangerous positions towards the east coast where they could disrupt Jacobite supplies, but also potentially draw them into an engagement somewhere where the Jacobites could find favourable territory. But this was a gamble, and there were some who were unsure that it was a wise one. They were worried about the potential for a threat towards Edinburgh and the Lothians if the army moved too far away from its base. As it turns out, they were only half right. Durand had explicit orders from George II to be brave and bold and ambitious, and to throw caution to the wind, frankly, and he had already decided, as the Jacobites had even started moving out of Edinburgh, that he was going in the opposite direction, and so Durand has been moving east, while the Jacobites have been moving west. And in fact, encouraged by his orders to take as many risks as he needs in order to create as much disruption as possible to the Jacobite rear, Durand has decided he's going to have a go at Berwick-upon-Tweed, because, although it's heavily fortified, the walls are only as good as the men that can man them. The Jacobites have been stripping their garrisons pretty thin in order first to replace losses in the main army, and secondly to create that new field army that Tullibardine is now marching on Glasgow. And so on the 12th of March 1746 in our campaign, Colonel Durand and the militias of northern England and southern Scotland are marching to retake Berwick-upon-Tweed for George II. If you are not familiar with the epic Elizabethan fortifications at Berwick-upon-Tweed, then why not? You really ought to pay them a visit. They're a fantastic attraction, really impressive, and they still are the defining feature of the Berwick townscape today. So here we are with an 18th century map of the fortifications, and this will be familiar to those of you who've seen recently the earlier video of the Duke of Perth's taking of the town, because the area that Perth used to attack the walls really is the only sensible way of trying to do it. The coastal side is large and open, provides no protection for any assault, and you'd have to march round into it in full view of the defenders. The southern side is protected by the River Tweed itself, with a narrow bridge crossing leading to the stone walls there. And so we're left with this side of the landscape with its 3 bastions, big stone walls, and then the line of the old medieval walls further out, and the ruins of the once mighty castle there on the riverside. As we did the previous time we attempted to recreate this landscape for Perth's advance, we're going to focus on this particular area here, because that covers the main road which comes into the Scots Gate, the main gate into the town there, squeezing into the suburbs, which provides some cover for an approaching force attempting to storm those gates. Durand, of course, has no artillery. He has, just like Perth did, no choice but to attempt an escalade upon the walls. So just taking the liberty of superimposing our tabletop onto the plan there, we can see that it'll focus on the bastion here, the wall, gate, and then riverside bastion, the river itself coming around here to the ruins of the castle, and then the line of the old medieval defences, already long disused over here, and then that area of suburbs leading up to the ditch that runs in front of the Elizabethan defences. So the main road is going to be Durand's only approach. He's going to have to take this fortress head on. So turning it around to the orientation I'll be using during the battle itself, we've got the River Tweed closing off the right-hand side of the landscape, the medieval walls with the belfry there running across to the ruins of the castle, the main road running through and carrying the assault forces over the wooden bridge that crosses the ditch. That ditch there, which was filled with a little bit of standing water after the recent rains, so it is an obstacle. It does slow down any advance on the walls themselves, and those 2 bastions there mounted each with 2 Jacobite guns, 1 each facing forwards, 1 each flanking into any assault on the curtain wall itself. And just an alternative view here, the approach of Durand's forces is going to have the benefit of cover provided by the medieval defences and those suburbs, but then when they emerge into the open, they are potentially going to be within range of both the cannons and any defenders on the wall itself. Luckily for Durand, then, there is only 1 small unit of Highlanders from the Duke of Perth's 2nd Battalion based here at Berwick. The rest of this regiment is with Tullibardine, which has now just reached Glasgow. Now, the fact that it's a clan regiment, and of course it's a small one, means that there's very limited musket fire capacity from this regiment on the walls. The defence of Berwick is going to be dependent on those cannons. In fact, the attacking force doesn't have particularly great firing statistics either, being entirely composed of militia. So it seems reasonable to expect that the outcome of this game will largely be dependent on the efficiency of these artillery crews on the bastions, if they can inflict enough damage on Durand's assault troops before they get their ladders against the foot of the wall. Durand's forces are entirely composed, of course, of blue-coated militias from northern England and southern Scotland. He has units from Lancashire, Carlisle itself, Cumberland more widely, and from Dumfriesshire too. He's got 4 full regiments, 1 half, and he's going to throw them straight at the defences. Now, as we developed in previous games, we have a sort of form of attack column that we use for this sort of operation, which allows them to move into a formation that can return very limited fire, but retains a lot of its aggressive capacity when it comes to hand. So we're sure that the assault column formation will be used by Durand in this engagement. Well, it takes a couple of moves for Durand to get his forces into position. There's not much that the Jacobites do in retaliation, but what Durand clearly intends to do is send an assault force against the first bastion, a second assault force against the curtain wall, a group in the centre who are still in march column to go forwards against the gate itself, perhaps to blow it with petards, and then he has a third principal assault group there ready to go in against the riverside bastion, covered perhaps by fire from the small unit, which has not formed an assault group because it would actually have very limited hand-to-hand power. So it's at the moment still in march column as it's got across the medieval line. So Durand's ladder parties are moving forwards in their assault formations. They are protected from the enemy's cannon and musket fire until they cross that line over the old medieval defences and start moving into the open ground towards the Tudor works. And of course, as soon as they cross that line, they are under fire from the Jacobite bastions. And in fact, the first assault group to come into range of those Jacobite guns takes a terrible pounding. Over the next few turns, this unit will be disordered and increasingly taking casualties. Once that disorder hits them and they're stuck there out in the open ground, there's really very little that they can do in response. Now, a combination of disorder, casualties, and failed order rolls means that the two assault columns on the left, on the north side of the battlefield, have stalled. In the centre, though, the main assault has gone through the suburbs and formed into an assault group ready to storm towards the gate with its petards. And the Glasgow militia themselves have moved forward with their ladders towards the riverside bastion. Their covering force is lagging a little bit behind. They have a chance to catch up, however, as you can see, because the Glasgow militia are delayed on the far British right by a disorder inflicted again by those Jacobite batteries. Glasgow militia are heroically pushing forwards towards the Tweedside bastion here, bringing their ladders up the side of the ditch, and you can see just beyond them that the small unit has got forward and is busy clearing away the cheval de frise and other obstacles that are defending the gateway area, clearing a path for the main petard assault. Glasgow gets the glory because that's the first unit to get its ladders planted at the foot of the walls, but amazingly, the small groups of men defending the Jacobite guns manage to hold them off. There is a problem with these militia forces once they get into hand-to-hand, especially against an enemy in a defensible position. So the Glasgow assault has been held. Now, there's a dramatic moment at this point where that battered unit from the north of England that had been struggling through heavy casualties on its approach to the walls suddenly rolls a double six, a blunder roll. But remarkably enough, when the blunder is rolled for, it simply determines that they must storm straight towards the enemy. And so, despite their heavy casualties, in they go. Heroic though this charge is, though, it's a disaster. They run straight into the closing fire from the Duke of Perth's men, and the flanking gun on that bastion opens up, tearing into them from the side. The militia are not only driven back, but they are completely dispersed. With two failed assaults on either side of it, the focus now comes to the Scots Gate itself, where the petard groups have finally got up to the gate, and they're able to start stashing their powder barrels ready to blow the charge. Now, in our assault games, we have a dice roll to determine what happens to a petard against a gate, and there are three outcomes: a failed explosion, a successful blowing of the gate, and a disastrously large explosion that damages anything within 6 inches of it. And it's the latter that we get. A huge force of explosion blows the gates straight off their hinges, of course, but also inflicts a casualty on the attacking force and on the Jacobite clansmen on the wall adjacent as well. It's an enormous blast. This is a really perilous moment for Durand's attack because they have suffered casualties from the flanking guns on both sides as they've gone in against that gate. They are now badly shaken, and the explosion of the gate has tipped them over the balance. They have to take a break test, and they survive it. And it means that they hold their position in front of the gate. Now, over the next turn, the Jacobites are able to bring their men off the walls and form them in front of the gate for what they know is coming next. Both of the other surviving intact units that are able to assault the walls are both in disorder at this point. The small unit that had been busily clearing obstacles for the petard group, that has been dispersed by Jacobite artillery fire as well. So as the flames start to spread into Berwick-upon-Tweed itself, the battle is pretty hot at the Scots Gate. The militia charge in, recovering from their test just outside the walls. The clansmen on the inside have had their hand-to-hand advantage largely neutralised by the smallness of their numbers. This is a hot fight. It takes place over 2 turns, and eventually both sides are driven back in complete disorder. But because of their position, because they are driven straight off the table ledge, the Duke of Perth's men are taken out of the game. At last, Durand's last assault group is able to get up towards the walls of the bastion, and this time it's a successful sweep into the Jacobite gun crews on the parapet. They are quickly overwhelmed. And so the English militiamen swarm over the bastion, and there's now nothing to stop them from penetrating right into the heart of Berwick-upon-Tweed. The last Jacobite gun crews on the last Jacobite bastion have no choice but to give it up. This is a huge relief for Durand. This has not been a clean or easy assault. He's taken far more casualties than the Duke of Perth had taken when he had stormed the town against the same number of defenders. Those Jacobite guns just got lucky on their rolls. Nevertheless, as the victors, they do have the chance to recover some of their strength as broken units will rally some of their men in the coming days. Durand, though, has lost half of his force. It's now questionable whether he has the strength to continue to be so aggressive in the future. For the moment, though, all the talk is of Durand's success. He has taken Berwick-upon-Tweed, recapturing that symbolic bastion between England and Scotland. He now has a block in the chain between Edinburgh and Newcastle. Jacobite communications are going to have to divert through the borders. There's now also questions to be asked over Tullibardin's leadership of the Jacobite cause in the south of Scotland. And, of course, some of the Jacobite sympathisers in the area who'd got used to the Jacobite control of the country now might start to have their doubts. Nevertheless, Tullibardin is still in Glasgow. He's inflicting heavy financial penalties on the burgesses there and making sure they make very serious commitments not to raise forces a third time against the Jacobite occupation. However, how is he now going to be able to respond to Durand's occupation of Berwick-upon-Tweed? Does Durand have the strength to continue being a menace? Or should Tullibardin now say that Durand is essentially out of the campaign because he can do little more than hold where he is? All those questions remain to be answered. Surely, however, somebody is going to have to tell the Prince of the situation in Scotland. And so our campaign moves towards the middle of March 1746, and there's a new round of recruitment just around the corner, as well, of course, as the spring, which means our armies are going to start being able to move faster around the landscape. Things might start speeding up, but something is going to have to break that deadlock in the south. As ever, thanks for watching.